People always think getting someone to finally express their feelings is about chasing harder, texting more, proving more, explaining more. But most of the time, that's exactly what pushes people further away. People always think getting someone to finally express their feelings is about doing more texting, more checking in, more explaining, more proving. They believe if they show enough love, enough patience, enough understanding, eventually the other person will open up and say everything they've been waiting to hear. But relationships do not usually work that way. In fact, the harder you push for emotional answers, the more someone may pull away. If you want him to finally tell you how he feels, understand something that changes everything. Silence reveals more than pressure. Most people become uncomfortable with silence. The moment they feel uncertainty, they rush to fill the empty space. They ask questions, they seek reassurance, they send another message, they explain themselves again. They try to create closeness because they fear distance means losing connection. But what they don't realize is that constant pressure often gives the other person an escape route. If you are always doing the emotional work, he never has to think about it. If every difficult conversation starts because of you, if every emotional moment gets opened by you, if every expression of care comes from you first, then what opportunity does he have to discover his own feelings? Sometimes people do not understand what they feel until they are left alone with their thoughts. Silence creates space. Space allows people to notice patterns. It allows them to feel absence. It allows them to ask themselves questions they avoid when someone else is doing all the talking. When you stop pushing for answers, something interesting happens. Suddenly he notices things he ignored before. The good morning messages that used to appear automatically are quieter. The constant availability changes. The emotional energy he depended on becomes less predictable, not because you are trying to punish him, not because you are playing games, but because you are allowing life to continue without constantly carrying the emotional connection on your shoulders. People value what they actively experience, not always what they are told. When somebody feels no pressure, they have room to become honest. Pressure creates defense. Silence creates reflection. This is where many people make mistakes. They hear "be silent" and think it means becoming cold or distant. That's not the point. Silence is not punishment. Silence is confidence. It is saying, I have communicated enough. I do not need to chase clarity from someone who is capable of giving it. There is strength in not forcing conversations before someone is ready to have them. You do not need to disappear. You do not need to ignore messages or pretend you do not care. You simply stop trying to control the timing of someone else's emotions, because real feelings do not grow under pressure. Imagine watering a plant every hour because you want it to grow faster. Eventually, too much attention becomes damage. Relationships can become like that. Constant emotional checking can stop natural realization from happening. When you become comfortable with silence, you also become more observant. You stop focusing only on words and start watching actions. Is he reaching out? Is he creating opportunities to connect? Is he remembering details? Is he becoming curious about your life? Sometimes people reveal feelings long before they speak them. And if silence shows you that nothing changes, if there is no effort, no interest, no movement, then silence gave you another gift. Clarity, because your goal is not to force a confession. Your goal is to understand whether feelings exist without having to pull them out. People who care eventually become uncomfortable with distance. They begin reaching. They start asking questions. They start becoming clearer. So instead of chasing words, allow room for truth. Not every silence means love is growing, but when someone truly feels something, silence often becomes the moment where they can no longer ignore it. Create peace instead of emotional chaos. A lot of people think emotions become stronger when everything feels dramatic. They believe if they show more passion, react more intensely, or make someone feel pressure, the other person will suddenly realize how much they care. But most emotionally healthy connections do not grow inside confusion. They grow inside peace. If you want him to finally tell you how he feels, stop becoming the source of emotional storms and become the place where clarity exists. Too many people accidentally create a relationship where every interaction feels heavy. Every delayed reply becomes a conversation. Every small change becomes a question. Every misunderstanding turns into a test. Over time, instead of feeling connection, the relationship starts feeling like responsibility. People naturally move toward environments where they feel calm, understood, and respected. This does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean accepting poor treatment. It means learning how to hold your emotions without making every feeling become an emergency. When someone knows that every conversation could become conflict, they often stop opening up. not because they do not care, but because they associate emotional honesty with pressure. Think about the difference between two situations. In one situation, someone says, "Why don't you talk to me anymore? Do you even care? Tell me what's wrong." In another situation, someone says, "I enjoy clear communication, but I also understand people process things differently." One creates tension, the other creates safety. People speak more honestly when they feel safe than when they feel cornered. Peace has power because it removes fear. A calm person is difficult to ignore because they are not competing for attention. They are not demanding validation. They're not trying to force outcomes. Their energy says, "I know my value whether you express your feelings today or not." That kind of energy changes dynamics. When you stop reacting to every little thing, people begin paying attention differently. Suddenly, your calm becomes noticeable. Instead of asking why he took hours to respond, you continue living your day. Instead of creating stories in your head, you wait for facts. Instead of sending multiple messages, you trust that communication goes both ways. This shift is powerful because confidence is peaceful, and peace creates attraction. People often confuse emotional intensity with emotional depth. They are not the same. Intensity can happen quickly. Depth is built slowly. Someone who constantly reacts emotionally can accidentally make another person focus on managing emotions instead of expressing feelings. But someone who stays grounded creates room for honesty. This also means protecting your peace. If you spend every day trying to decode messages, predict behavior, and earn reassurance, your emotional energy becomes exhausted. The truth is simple. The right connection should not require endless emotional detective work. You should not have to constantly wonder where you stand. Peace means understanding that uncertainty does not always require immediate action. It means being comfortable enough with yourself that you can allow conversations to unfold naturally. And there is something else that happens when you become peaceful. You become more attractive. Not because you are pretending not to care, but because calm confidence feels rare. People notice when someone is secure. They notice when someone listens more than they react. They notice when someone chooses understanding over drama. And sometimes that calm creates curiosity. He starts wondering why you seem different, why you no longer chase, why conversations feel easier, why your energy feels lighter. That curiosity often opens emotional doors because now the focus is no longer on defending feelings. Now there is room to discover them. Peace does not mean lowering standards. Peace means refusing to sacrifice your emotional balance while waiting for someone else to become clear. Your calm should never come from giving up your needs. It should come from trusting that the right emotions do not need to be forced. When someone experiences consistency, warmth, respect, and calm instead of pressure and chaos, they often become more willing to speak honestly. Not because they were pushed, but because peace finally gave them space to understand what they feel. Focus on your own life so completely that your attention becomes earned, not guaranteed. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they want someone to finally express their feelings is making that person the center of everything. Suddenly, the day revolves around replies. Mood depends on attention. Plans begin changing based on availability. The relationship becomes less about connection and more about waiting. And here's what happens when someone becomes your entire focus. You slowly stop becoming interesting to yourself. People are naturally drawn to movement. They notice people who are building something, improving something, creating something, living with direction. Attraction is not only about appearance or words. A huge part of attraction comes from energy. The energy of someone who has purpose feels different from the energy of someone who is waiting. When your entire world becomes centered on whether he texts, calls, opens up, or explains himself, your attention becomes automatic. And automatic attention often becomes invisible. That does not mean people stop caring. It means they stop noticing. If somebody knows your time, emotions, and focus will always be available no matter what they do, there is no reason for them to become intentional. But when you become invested in your own life, something changes. You stop counting minutes. You stop checking your phone every few moments. You stop creating imaginary conversations. You stop measuring your value through responses. And ironically, this is often the moment people become more aware of your presence. Not because you disappeared, because you became complete. There is something powerful about a person who has goals, routines, passions, and peace that exist outside of romantic attention. Think about people you admire. Usually they are not sitting around trying to convince everyone to choose them. They are busy becoming who they want to be. Their attention feels valuable because it comes from a full life. This is what people misunderstand about attraction. It is not about acting unavailable. It is about actually being engaged in your own world. Go build things, learn things, improve skills, spend time with people who bring out your best Gakwe memories that do not depend on one person. Fill your calendar with experiences that remind you life is bigger than waiting for emotional certainty. When you do this, conversations change. You stop talking only about the relationship. You bring fresh energy. You become someone who adds to life instead of someone asking life to begin. That shift is noticeable because people feel when someone is emotionally dependent versus emotionally grounded. And there is another reason this matters. When your life becomes meaningful outside of him, you stop accepting confusion for too long. You become less willing to tolerate mixed signals, not because you become cold, because your life becomes valuable enough that protecting your time starts making sense. Your standards quietly rise. You stop thinking, how do I make him choose me? And start asking, does this connection deserve access to my energy? That question changes everything because when attention is earned, people appreciate it more. Imagine someone who always responds immediately, cancels plans, rearranges priorities, and waits constantly. Now imagine someone who is warm, present, caring, but also busy building a meaningful life. Which attention feels more valuable? Usually the second. Not because they care less, because their attention comes from choice. People often open up emotionally when they realize they are not competing against another person. They are competing against your peace. They notice you are happy. They notice you are growing. They notice your world continues moving, and suddenly they become curious. They ask more questions. They initiate more conversations. They wonder where they fit, not because you manipulated them, because your energy stops saying, please choose me. Now it says, I am creating a beautiful life. And connection is welcome, but it is not the whole story. That energy creates respect, and respect often becomes the foundation for honesty. So instead of making your life smaller while waiting for someone's feelings to become bigger, build a life that excites you, because when your happiness becomes self-created, your attention becomes something meaningful. And people often realize what they feel when they understand your world no longer pauses while they figure themselves out. Stop rewarding confusion. One of the hardest truths to accept in relationships is that people usually continue doing what works for them. If confusion keeps getting rewarded with attention, patience, reassurance, and endless chances, then confusion becomes comfortable. And when confusion becomes comfortable, clarity becomes unnecessary. A lot of people do not realize they are rewarding uncertainty because they believe they are being understanding. They tell themselves love means waiting longer, being more patient, giving more chances, staying available, improving loyalty. But there is a difference between giving someone time and giving someone unlimited access to your energy while they stay undecided. If you want him to finally tell you how he feels, stop making emotional uncertainty feel easy. This does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean creating games. It means respecting reality. When someone says, I don't know what I want, listen. When someone says, I'm confused, believe that they are confused. Do not rush in and translate uncertainty into commitment. Do not take silence and rename it depth. Do not take inconsistency and rename it fear. Do not take distance and rename it hidden love. People often suffer because they become emotionally attached to possibilities instead of paying attention to patterns. You start imagining who someone could become instead of accepting who they are being. You begin filling in emotional blanks. You explain their behavior. You justify their absence. You tell yourself they are overwhelmed, scared, stressed, busy, healing, confused. Maybe sometimes that is true, but eventually there comes a point where understanding becomes self-abandonment, because understanding someone should never require abandoning clarity for yourself. Think about what happens when confusion gets rewarded. Someone gives mixed signals. You move closer. Someone becomes distant. You work harder. Someone avoids difficult conversations. You become more patient. Without realizing it, you teach the relationship that uncertainty earns effort, that creates imbalance. Now, one person carries emotional responsibility while the other person decides whenever they feel ready. That is exhausting. And eventually you begin questioning yourself. You wonder if you ask for too much. You wonder if your expectations are too high. You wonder if wanting clarity makes you demanding. But wanting clarity is not asking for too much. Healthy relationships are not built on decoding hidden meanings. They are built on communication, effort, and emotional honesty. Stopping confusion does not mean demanding immediate commitment. It means deciding that uncertainty cannot continue forever without consequences. It means being willing to say, I enjoy connection, but I also value clarity. Notice the difference. That statement is not pressure. It is self-respect. There is strength in allowing people to choose freely, but there is also strength in deciding what you are available for. You do not need to threaten anyone. You do not need to announce your standards dramatically. You simply stop over-investing where clarity does not exist. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop carrying emotional momentum. You stop creating excuses before facts appear. And something interesting happens. People often become more honest when they realize confusion no longer guarantees access. Not because they are being manipulated, because uncertainty is no longer comfortable. Now they have to ask themselves real questions. Do I want this? Am I showing up? Am I being clear? Do I value this person enough to communicate? That moment matters because someone who truly cares usually becomes uncomfortable losing connection. They begin expressing themselves. They become more intentional. They move closer. And if they do not, that answer matters too. Clarity is not only hearing someone say they care. Clarity is also recognizing when effort never appears. Stopping confusion protects your emotional energy. Instead of spending months trying to interpret behavior, you create space for relationships where communication happens naturally. You stop making potential more important than reality. You stop confusing waiting with loyalty. You stop believing love means endless endurance. Love without clarity becomes emotional guessing, and emotional guessing creates exhaustion. So hold your standards quietly. Do not punish. Do not chase. Do not rescue people from making decisions. Allow actions to speak. Allow consistency to matter. Allow confusion to remain what it is until clarity replaces it. Because the moment you stop rewarding uncertainty is often the moment truth finally becomes visible, become harder to emotionally predict. Now, before people misunderstand this, becoming harder to emotionally predict does not mean becoming fake, manipulative, cold, or unavailable. It does not mean playing games or pretending not to care. It means learning to stop putting your entire emotional world on display every single moment. Too many people believe honesty means revealing everything immediately. Every thought gets shared. Every feeling gets explained. Every disappointment gets announced. Every hope gets spoken out loud. And over time, the relationship loses mystery. Not mystery in a dramatic sense, but in the sense that there is no room left for curiosity. When someone always knows exactly where they stand with you, exactly how much you will tolerate, exactly how available you are, and exactly how quickly you will forgive, they can slowly begin to take emotional certainty for granted. Predictability can create comfort, but too much predictability can remove appreciation. Think about this. If someone already knows no matter what happens, you will reply instantly, stay emotionally available, explain your feelings repeatedly, and never create boundaries, then there is very little reason for them to become intentional. Again, this is not about becoming difficult. It is about becoming balanced. There is a difference. Balanced people do not react immediately to every emotion. They feel emotions but choose how and when to express them. They do not reveal every fear the moment it appears. They do not constantly seek reassurance. They do not chase understanding. They allow moments to breathe, and that creates emotional space. One mistake people make is believing that if someone does not express feelings immediately, then they must express more to compensate. But sometimes the opposite creates better results. Instead of explaining how disappointed you are every single time, observe. Instead of telling him exactly what you need every day, notice whether he pays attention. Instead of making your feelings louder, allow your standards to become clearer. People often reveal who they are when they are not being guided. If you constantly explain, remind, and direct someone emotionally, they never have to become emotionally aware. You become the entire emotional system of the relationship that becomes exhausting. When you become slightly less predictable emotionally, something interesting happens. People start becoming more attentive, not because they are confused, because they are curious. Curiosity creates engagement. If your mood is always determined by someone else's attention, your reactions become expected. But when your emotions come from internal stability instead of external validation, your energy feels different. You stop reacting dramatically to delayed replies. You stop celebrating minimal effort. You stop showing excitement before consistency exists. And suddenly your emotional responses carry more meaning. Warmth becomes valuable because it is intentional. Attention becomes meaningful because it is chosen. Approval becomes something earned through connection, not automatically given. This also means not explaining every decision. If you need time, take time. If something bothers you, communicate once clearly instead of repeating yourself endlessly. If someone disappoints you, do not rush to prove your disappointment. Allow behavior to speak. People often notice emotional shifts more than emotional speeches, and another powerful thing happens. You start trusting yourself, because emotional unpredictability in a healthy sense means your choices stop depending on someone else's behavior. You become less controlled by attention, less controlled by silence, less controlled by uncertainty. You stop asking, how should I act so he tells me how he feels? And you start asking, what response actually aligns with my values? That shift changes everything, because confidence is naturally difficult to predict. Confident people are not emotionally unavailable. They simply do not surrender their emotional center to another person. Some days they are warm, some days they are focused, some days they need space. But none of it comes from trying to create reactions. It comes from authenticity. And authenticity creates respect. People tend to open up when they realize they cannot rely on emotional certainty without contributing something themselves. They start paying attention. They notice changes. They become more intentional. Not because they are chasing drama, because they are beginning to value connection. So stop announcing every feeling. Stop giving away every answer. Stop trying to prove your emotions through constant explanation. Leave room for people to wonder. Leave room for actions to speak. Leave room for curiosity, because sometimes people finally recognize what they feel when they realize your emotional world no longer revolves around making them comfortable enough to stay silent. Understand that real feelings show up when there is something real to lose. This is the part most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable. Everybody talks about attraction, communication, and emotional connection, but very few people talk about the role that value and consequence play in relationships. If someone believes nothing changes, whether they speak or stay silent, whether they commit or remain uncertain, whether they show effort or stay passive, then emotions can stay hidden for a very long time. Not because feelings do not exist, but because there is no reason to act on them. People often wait for certainty before expressing themselves. They wait until they feel completely safe. They wait until they know the other person will stay. They wait until the risk disappears. But relationships do not work like that. At some point, emotions require courage. And courage usually appears when someone realizes something matters enough to lose. This is where many people make a mistake. They become so available, so understanding, so endlessly patient that the relationship never reaches a moment of truth. Every mixed signal gets forgiven. Every delay gets accepted. Every uncertainty gets extended. And over time, one person keeps investing while the other keeps postponing. The connection survives, but honesty never arrives. If you want him to finally tell you how he feels, stop making your presence feel unlimited. Unlimited access creates comfort. Valued access creates appreciation. That does not mean threatening people. It does not mean disappearing. It means quietly understanding that your energy, attention, time, and emotional availability are meaningful resources. When people believe something meaningful will remain available forever, regardless of effort, they stop becoming intentional. Think about moments in life that made people act: deadlines, opportunities, transitions. Realization often appears when time starts feeling important. Relationships can work the same way. When someone notices your life is moving, your standards are becoming stronger, your focus is expanding, and your emotional dependence is shrinking, something changes. Now they must ask themselves difficult questions. Will I speak? Will I step forward? Will I stay passive? Do I actually want this? Because comfort hides feelings. Awareness reveals them. This is why endlessly waiting rarely creates clarity. Waiting can become emotional protection. As long as nothing changes, decisions can stay postponed. But once reality becomes visible, emotions become harder to ignore. This is also why you should never confuse availability with love. Love is not proven by endless access. Love is shown through intentional presence. Someone who truly values connection usually wants to protect it. They want communication. They want understanding. They want to know they are building something. That effort matters. And if someone only becomes emotional when they feel distance, that does not automatically mean manipulation. Sometimes people genuinely do not understand what they feel until they feel contrast. Humans notice value through experience. People miss routines after routines disappear. They appreciate conversations after silence appears. They recognize emotional safety after they no longer assume it. But there is an important difference. You do not create distance to make someone panic. You create healthy independence so reality becomes visible. You continue your life. You continue your goals. You continue your standards. You continue showing kindness, but you stop organizing your world around waiting. That shift changes your energy. Now your attention feels intentional. Now your presence feels chosen. Now your connection becomes something that requires participation. And when participation becomes necessary, feelings often become clearer. Some people will move closer. Some people will become more expressive. Some people will finally say things they delayed saying. And some people will remain silent. That matters too, because silence is also information. If somebody only values you when they think they are losing access, pay attention. If somebody becomes clearer through respect, effort, and intentional action, pay attention. Truth often appears when comfort disappears. And remember this, your goal is not to create fear. Your goal is not to make someone chase. Your goal is not to engineer emotions. Your goal is to stop protecting people from making choices. You are not responsible for creating somebody else's feelings. You are responsible for protecting your own value. You cannot force honesty. You cannot force timing. You cannot force emotional readiness. But you can decide not to make silence endlessly comfortable. You can decide your life continues whether someone speaks today or tomorrow. You can decide that your peace is not dependent on another person's emotional timeline. Because the strongest position you can stand in is knowing this. If someone truly sees your value, they eventually become willing to risk clarity rather than risk losing the chance to be part of your life.